All right, I think we're going to get started. Hello, Happy New Year, and welcome to Grow with Hebrew College. This is a monthly series that allows participants from around the world to gather together, reflect, and observe and wrestle with important ideas relevant to our lives today. I'm Kim Bodemer, and I'm the Director of Adult Learning at Hebrew College. Just want to make sure you all know that Hebrew College has many opportunities to engage in learning. Whether you're interested in standalone sessions like this or looking for ongoing course, Hebrew College has something that will nourish your mind and feed your soul. Our winter-spring course catalog is now live and ready to go, with courses beginning some at the end of this month, some in February, some in March, and even some beginning in April. And I invite you to check out our offerings. And I know my colleague Robin is going to put that link in the chat. But today's growth session is led by Hebrew College Vice President, Dr. Susie Tanchel. Together, we're going to be exploring unexpected encounters through selected biblical texts in which a person receives an unexpected revelation from God or has an encounter that forever changes their trajectory. Susie joined Hebrew College in 2020 after serving as the head of school for JCDS, Boston's Jewish Community Day School, and she has a true passion for Tanakh, the Hebrew Bible. And she was the recipient of the 2018 Covenant Award for Jewish Educators. And since we have a robust participation today and multiple screens, Susie's just asked that if you have an observation or reflection or a question, that you can either send it through the chat. She's going to pause at different points during the presentation, or use the feature where you electronically raise your hand, which you can find at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And without further ado, I'm going to start sharing my screen for Susie, and I'm going to turn it over to her.
Thank you so much, Kim. Hi, everybody. I'm really thrilled to see so many familiar faces and also to meet some new ones. We're going to jump right in because we don't have that much time today. There's never enough time to study Torah. That's the first takeaway. Just know that. Never enough time to study Torah. But we're going to begin really by thinking about, as Kim said, some unexpected encounters, because you might think to yourself, well, of course, in the Tanakh, there are moments between God and people, right? We would expect that. And there are moments certainly like in Bereshit, in Genesis, where Rebecca goes to God and says, I have these, in chapter 27, I have like pain in my belly, what's going on? And God comes right back and says, you have, twins in your womb. So we're not going to look at those kinds of moments today, but we're going to look at some that might be a little familiar to you. And if so, I ask you to look at them with fresh eyes, and some texts that might be completely foreign to you. That's okay. The only thing that you don't need deep subject matter knowledge for this. You just need an open heart and an open mind, and we're going to have some fun together. So let's go. We're going to start by looking at a text from Genesis chapter 16. This is a story about Hagar, who has just been treated very harshly by Sarai. Her name is Sarai at this text, before her name changes. So let's start with looking at the first text. Kim, if you could change the slide. To Genesis chapter 16. And I'm going to ask for volunteers to read text, but since I didn't know exactly who was going to show up, I asked my friend Susan Morel if you would take the first one. Genesis chapter 16, verses 6 through 10 would be great.
Absolutely. Can everybody hear me? Good. Okay. Abram said to Sarai, your maid is in your hands. Deal with her as you think right. Then Sarai treated her harshly, and she ran away from her. A messenger of Adonai found her by a spring of water in the wilderness, the spring on the road to Shur, and said, Hagar, slave of Sarai, where have you come from and where are you going? And she said, I am running away from my mistress Sarai. And the messenger of Adonai said to her, "Go back to your mistress and submit to her harsh treatment." And the messenger of Adonai said to her, "I will greatly increase your offspring, and they shall be too many to count."
Okay, so here we have, imagine the scene for a moment. Thank you, Susan. Imagine the scene for a moment. We have this slave woman, Hagar, leaving. She's just been dealt so harshly, and she's hanging in the desert. And you can imagine that she must be unbelievably afraid, perhaps feeling vulnerable, not knowing like what was going to happen next. How was she going to survive? And then what happens is she gets this oracle, this encounter with a messenger from God. And the messenger from God gives her both amazing news and less heartening news, right? On the one hand, says you're going to have a baby. Woohoo! And in the verse that I cut off the translation, but it says that you're going to have in verse 11 in the Hebrew, it says you're going to give birth to a son, and you're going to name him Ishmael because God heard you. God heard that you've been concerned. So just so you know, having a son in the Bible, best thing ever. Those of you who are feminists, hang in there. It's going to be okay. We're going to come back to another text later, but just, it's a fact. Having a firstborn male, woohoo, we celebrate that. So so Hagar gets this encounter. It's unexpected, but she immediately goes back to Sarai, goes back to the place where she had the harsh treatment, and she allows this moment, this unexpected encounter, to have a profound impact on her. Because who knows where she was going to go and what was going to happen to her in the desert. So she turns around and goes back. Now, just for a moment, think about in moments of vulnerability, what helps us? What allows us to be open to be impacted by something else? So in this moment, Hagar, feeling vulnerable, got this revelation, boom, turned around and went back to Sarai, and in fact did give birth to a son named Ishmael. So I wanted to start there, but we're going to move very quickly, and we're going to slow down after this, but we're going to move very quickly now to the second text, which some of you may know, which is about Moshe at the burning bush. But what I want you to do is when we hear these words, I want you to think about what might have been going on for Moses in this moment. What might be his feelings, his thoughts as he's in this situation? So do we have someone who will volunteer to read Exodus chapter 3, verses 1 through 5? Raise your hand. Claire, thank you so much.
And now Moses, tending the flock of his father-in-law Jethro, the priest of Midian, drove the flock into the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. A messenger of Adonai appeared to him in a blazing fire out of a bush. He gazed, and there was a bush, all aflame, yet the bush was not consumed. Moses said, "I must turn aside to look at this marvelous sight. Why doesn't the bush burn up?" When Adonai saw that he had turned aside to look, God called to him out of the bush. "Moses, Moses," he answered, "Here I am." And God said, "Do not come close. Remove your sandals from your feet, for the place on which you stand is holy ground."
Thank you so much, Claire. So this is not a rhetorical question. This is a real question. What do you all think Moshe is feeling, thinking about in this moment? How do you understand his choice? Now I can't see everyone on the screen. So if you want to raise your hand, you're going to need to use the electronic. Oh, Mike Gildersgame, I saw your hand for a moment.
Yes, well, I think that he's got to be partially scared because someone's talking to him out of this strange bush. And he's also very curious and what makes this place holy. He's trying to understand all this. Lots of unknowns.
Yeah, lots of unknowns. Right. So curiosity, I'm going to come back to in a moment. And also, yeah, how odd is it for a voice to be talking out of a bush? We don't often think about that because we read this text and we kind of know what's going to happen. But that's a little weird. Susan, did you want to add something?
Just like Abraham listens to the voice of God, I sometimes think these things are all around us, and that, God may be speaking all the time, and it's whoever listens. And the bush might be burning. Who knows who walked past it and ignored it, and he
Oh,
stopped.
that is fantastic. Yes, these things might be happening all around us. I want to actually, with that thought of the curiosity and things being all around us in this moment, I want to, well, let me just take the comment from Marcy, and then Kim, if we can go to the next slide. But hold on one second. Let's just hear Marcy.
Thank you. I have read this verse before, but today I was struck by that he looked aside. He turned aside to look, and I'm wondering, I always imagined that the bush was directly in front of him. And so I'm struck by that. Why did he need to turn aside? And I don't know, I saw that he had turned aside. So we hear it twice. And I'm just wondering about the meaning of that.
Yeah, well, texts are open to multiple interpretation. So I don't know what the meaning is, but I can offer a meaning, which is something about, if we link it up to what Mike and the other comments were about the curiosity and being kind of aware in the moment. Sometimes it's happening in your peripheral vision. Sometimes it's not right in front of you. Sometimes you have to turn aside to notice it. So Kim, if you could go to the next slide. One of my favorite Jewish scholars in the world is Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, and it is hard for me to ever speak publicly and not reference him. So he wrote in a book, Man is Not Alone, this wonderful brief comment. Wonder is a state of mind in which we do not look at reality through the lattice work of our memorized knowledge. We don't look at the world through what we already know. We look at the world in which nothing is taken for granted. Our goal should be to live life in radical amazement, to get up in the morning and look at the world in a way that takes nothing for granted. Everything is phenomenal. Everything is incredible. Never treat life casually. How cool and amazing is that, right? This wonder, this being willing to turn aside. And Marcy, I gotta say, I've read this text, I don't know, maybe 100 times, maybe 300 times. I've never thought about the turning aside before. So look at that. See, this is why these texts are so worthy of careful reading and really going back to them again and again, because where you are and what you're thinking about may have an impact of what you see in the text in any given moment. So Heschel is saying then, much like what we were saying, is that there are moments where we need to be curious and open. There might be things that the world and the universe is offering us, for some people, God, but that if we're not open to it, we aren't going to take advantage of the opportunity, the gifts that are coming our way. I see that, Shelley, yes.
I presume at that time, it was not uncommon to see a burning bush. That maybe something that happened because of the heat or a lightning strike or whatever. And a lot of people probably went by this bush when it was burning. But Moses was the only one that met the requirement that you have up here. He noticed, although no one else did at the time, he noticed that this bush was not being consumed.
Totally.
So this is an example of what you're talking about.
Exactly.
And this probably contributed to God choosing Moses.
100%. I totally believe it had an impact on God choosing Moshe, and that saying that, yes, curiosity is a deep value. I see other hands. I'm actually going to move on only because I want to get to some of the text, but we're going to have some time for questions and comments at the end. So when we get back, Dov, we're going to start with you when we have questions or comments at the end. So I want to actually, I was going to talk a little bit about Jacob also in a moment of really seeing what was possible. But we're actually not going to dwell there, because now I see how what an interesting interaction we can have. I want to be able to go into fewer texts and delve a little bit more deeply. So Kim, if you could go to Jonah. So we have some examples. We've just seen some examples where Moshe and Hagar, and the Jacob example that we skipped over, where people were open and ready to see what is possible. But sometimes people are not. Sometimes people are closed to possibility. And here we have an example of a Navi, a prophet, who a message came to him and he wasn't ready. So if somebody could read Jonah chapter 1, verses 1 through 4. Please. Go ahead, Karen. And nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. I'm going to try this with my vision here. The word of God came to Jonah, son of Amittai. Go at once to Nineveh, that great city, and proclaim judgment upon it, for their wickedness had come before me. Jonah, however, started out to flee to Tarshish from God's service. He went down to Joppa and found a ship going to Tarshish. He paid the fare and went aboard to sail with the others to Tarshish, away from God's service. But God cast a mighty wind upon the sea, and such a great tempest came upon the sea that the ship was in danger of breaking up.
So I want to tell you that this book of Jonah, which we read every Yom Kippur at Mincha, this book is one of the most perplexing books to me. I've taught it a lot of times, and I still, every time I teach it, I learn new things, but it's still a complicated story. And taking some verses out of the broader context makes it that much more complicated. But the part that I want to focus on here is he gets this message, right? Now, let's be clear, if we in 2024, we heard a voice that told us to go and proclaim something, and we went out, if it wasn't Hyde Park in London, because they still get on soapboxes there and say prophecies, but anywhere else in the world, you might get put into a white jacket and taken away. But at this point in life, apparently it wasn't kind of so out of the ordinary. That's not the part of the text. That's not the part of the story that the text really focuses on. But the Jonah gets this word and he's told to go to Nineveh. Now, Nineveh, let's be clear, is at this time Israel's arch enemy. Really, the serious enemy. The ruler, Nineveh was the capital of Assyria, which ruled the ancient Near East prior to it being destroyed in 612 BCE by the Babylonians. So he's being told, go to your arch enemies and proclaim this judgment against them. And he's like, no way. I am not open to this. I don't want to do it. And I'm going to run away. Dov, yes. Dov, you're still muted.
I think this is profoundly significant, that about our running away from ourselves many times in our life. I think that's the deeper message for me here.
Yeah. Right. And he tries to run away. And yes, running away from ourselves, just like running away from ourselves, he can't escape. You can't escape when you try to run away from yourself. And you can't escape in the Tanakh in the Bible, when you try to run away from God. You can't do it. And he has he lands up on this boat, and he's in the very bottom part of it, and the sailors figure out that something's going on, and Jonah confesses to him being the problem, and then there's this great big fish that swallows him up. It's not a whale. If you think I just made a mistake by calling it a fish, the text says it's a big fish, not a whale. So he's swallowed up by this big fish, and then he's saved, and God gives him another shot to go off and do this. And Jonah changes, seemingly. The second time God says, go to Nineveh and proclaim this message, Jonah does. And lo and behold, the people change. And then this is Jonah's response, which is in now the end of the book, Jonah chapter 4. He says, God, I knew that this was what was going to happen when I was still back in my own country. Why did I have to bother God? Really? I knew this was going to happen. They were going to repent, and you were going to forgive them. Why? For I know, ki ata, I'll translate in a moment, ki ata el chanun v'rachum, erech alpayim v'rav chesed. Why? Because I know you are a slow and compassionate, gracious God, slow to anger, abounding in kindness. Now, in this moment, for some of you, you're going back and you're thinking, wait a second, that sounds so familiar. Adonai, el rachum v'chanun, erech alpayim, because we say it a lot on Yom Kippur. But actually, though, that pasuk, that verse is found in Exodus chapter 34, verse 6, which is just below. And this is what that text says. A compassionate God, Adonai, el rachum v'chanun, erech alpayim v'rav chesed v'emet. So my question is, what is the difference between what Jonah said in describing God's attributes and what the text of Shmot says, what the text of Exodus says? Does anybody see a difference? Ellen, I saw you nodding your head. Do you want to say it out loud?
Sure, renouncing punishment as opposed to truth, upholding truth.
Yes. So Jonah, when he talks about God, he says that he renounces punishment, that God changes, God repents, God says, like, I'm not going to do the punishment. But in Shmot, it says ve'emet, in truth. And here's the thing. I don't think that Jonah understands God's essence and God's truth. That's what led him to make this complaint. Because wouldn't we want a God who would forgive when you're repenting? Jonah doesn't, because he's got a lot of issues going on, which if we ever get to study the whole book together, we can do more of. But for right now, he doesn't say God's emet, God's truth. Even though, if you go back to the previous slide, you'll see the first verse. What's his dad's name? He's Jonah, son of Amittai. The shoresh of Amittai, the root emet, truth. He is the son of Amittai, the son of truth. But in his lifetime, the part that we know about, he doesn't get God's essence, God's truth. And so he's still angry that people are forgiven. He was not open. He was not curious. Now, I'm not saying that like we always have to judge people. I'm not arguing for like judging people who are closed and not open. But what I am saying is sometimes you miss out unless you have somebody who can help you out. And that's going to take us to the next text. Oh, I see a hand. Shira, yeah. Hi, Shira.
Hello. There's another piece of this that was very familiar, if you don't mind my saying, which is in our social action and politics and whatnot. You take an action, it improves things. And the people who didn't want you to take that action somehow will turn it and say, see, it wasn't necessary. I'm just saying that's what I can't quite explain it exactly because I don't have an
Yeah.
exact example in my mind, but that's what jumped out at me also, that because I do think the Torah sort of tells you a lot about how the world works, and it's
Yes.
stunning to me that the exact same thinking is what we go through now. See, there was no
Yeah.
point in doing that. It's fine now.
Yeah, right. As if the action didn't actually yield the change.
Yes, thank you for
I
listening.
love that. Oh my gosh, Shira, I love that. And it also brings to light one of the things that I truly hold closest to me in my heart, and which is why I study biblical texts for any reason, which is that there is such modern resonance, right? These are ancient texts with modern resonance. It's astounding to me that the Parsha, the weekly portion, is relevant every single time. Biblical texts always have something to say to us. We just have to be open to hearing it. Yes, Jay.
So I was interested in your reference to son of Amittai and the root emet. Does Amittai mean my truth?
It would, yes.
So does that change the name of the, how we view the Father? It's my truth, not truth, but my truth.
Interesting. Interesting, especially given the politics of today, right? That we all have our own truths, and then we go into different corners, and then really figuring out how do you live in a pluralistic community where you can have conversation across difference really matters. Very interesting. Claire, yes.
I just noticed that in the portion where God speaks, he doesn't say I. He just says Adonai or something. He doesn't say I, whereas Jonah says you.
Oh, interesting.
He keeps it more impersonal.
Right. A little more distant.
Now, honey.
A little more distant.
What?
I'm going to the dentist now.
Okay.
This is a good reminder, as if you're not
Be a
speaking to
nice girl.
mute. Okay, I see another hand, Ari, but we got to go to the next text, but we might get you in the question answer section. So this next text might not be so familiar to people, but I love this text. It happens that I'm going to be teaching a course starting in February, I think, called Courageous and Audacious Voices in the Tanakh. And I have a feeling that this text is going to find its way in there for a longer discussion, because there's a secret inside of it that will not be revealed today. But I still want to just take a snippet of it because it is one of the most fascinating texts that I think largely gets overlooked when studying biblical texts. So this is a text from Judges chapter 13. And where we were was we had Jonah, who was sort of closed off to the message of God. Now there is a guy, and his name is Manoah, and his wife's name is Mrs. Manoah. We don't know her name. I can only call her Mrs. Manoah. That's part of the whole secret of the text, which I'm not going to talk about right now. But Mrs. Manoah is infertile and has borne no children. And so we're going to pick up this text, excuse me, in verse 3. And if somebody could just read verse 3 and verse 6, that would be great. Go ahead, Elena. Thank you.
Elena, you're muted. There
Got
you
it.
go.
She
Sorry
knows.
about that. An angel of God appeared to the woman and said to her, "You are infertile and have borne no children, but you shall conceive and bear a son." The woman went and told her husband, "An agent of God came to me. He looked like an angel of God, very frightening. I did not ask him where he was from, nor did he tell me his name."
Okay, so for those of you who haven't taken Angel Class 101, I just want to give you just a couple of hints, just for if you happen to be walking on the street tomorrow and you see an angel of God, I just want you to know a couple things. First is, you never ask an angel of God his, or dare I say, her or their name. It's just not done. You don't ask their name and you don't ask where they're from. It's just impolite. It's like basic and you can't blow it. Okay? But here's what's amazing about Mrs. Manoah. I totally love her. Mrs. Manoah gets it right away. She must be, I have never met her, but I imagine her to be a deeply spiritual soul. Because she gets this message. Now we know, right? Because the narrator told us it's an angel of God. But you have to imagine that it's not like an angel from like later autistic with the big wings and the white and all of that. Like, so the woman gets it and she goes to her husband and says, a woman went and told her husband, an angel of God came to me. She's got it. He looks like an angel of God. I did not ask him where he was from, nor did he tell me his name. Great. She's totally got it. She's told her husband everything. And what do you imagine her husband's going to say now? Wow, isn't it amazing? An angel of God came to my wife. Ah, I am so fortunate. That's not quite how this goes. He goes and he says, we don't have this part, but he goes and he says, could you come back again? Because I don't really know what just happened with my wife. And the text says the angel of the Lord appeared again to his wife. He's totally out of the picture. But the woman basically brings the angel to meet her husband because, what is she going to do? So if you go to the next text in verses 15, Manoah said to the angel of God, let us detain you and prepare a kid for you. Let me tell you, in addition to no name and don't know where you come from, it's also true that they don't eat. So the angel of God said to Manoah, if you detain me, I shall not eat your food. If you want to prepare a burnt offering, offer it to God. Now, here's the thing that's so funny. And then the narrator says to us, for Manoah did not know that he was an angel of God. Yeah, we know that because he's offering the guy food. So Manoah said to the angel of God, what is your name? We should like to honor you when your words come true. Hello? Weren't you paying attention in Angel 101? You don't ask angels their names. It's not the right thing to do. This guy. Forget like Jonah who hears God and runs away. This guy doesn't even get it at all. But the angel's very patient. He's like that guy in the Talmud who teaches 400 times. He's very patient. He said to him, you must not ask my name, for it is unknowable. So Manoah took the kid and he does this offering. As the flames leapt up from the altar toward the sky, the angel of God ascended into the flames of the altar, while Manoah and his wife looked on, and they flung themselves on the ground. The angel of God never appeared to Manoah and his wife again. Manoah then realized, only then, when he sees this guy go up in this flame, that he was an angel of God. And Manoah said to his wife, we will surely die, for we have seen a divine being. This is a guy who only sees the downside, apparently. Like in modern times, we would say the glass is like not half empty, half full. They would say the glass is half full, right? Manoah, he's just had this revelation from God, and the only thing he can think to say is, holy cow, now we're going to die because we've seen a divine being. Baruch Hashem, thank God his wife is there to save the day. Has God meant to take our lives? God would never have put us in this position, not to mention the fact told me that I would have a child. Because if I was going to die, then I wouldn't have the kid. So here we have, there is more to this woman even that I could bring to you today. I'm telling you, she is totally awesome. If you want, go read the story, Judges 13. You still might become confused a little bit about what the secret of the message is. Send me an email, stanchel at hebrewcollege.edu. just to uncover the secret of this text. But in the meantime, we have Manoah who had this encounter and didn't get it at all. But fortunately for him, he had a brilliant wife who was deeply spiritual and in touch with things and could explain it to him. So for everybody who always dismisses biblical texts as patriarchal, I want to tell you, there's more there than meets the eye. Carol, yes.
I think we have a somewhat similar story with Hannah, where when she tells Elkanah she's going to have a baby, he just thinks she's drunk. So there's a little bit of parallel there.
Yeah, right. Another wise woman. Yeah, totally. So I want to jump to our last set of texts, which we're going to move from kind of an unexpected encounter to an expected encounter with a surprising message. And I want to tell you that we're going to look at a text from the book of Ezekiel. And for those of you who don't know, Ezekiel was a prophet who, I don't know, might have been taking hallucinogens. I don't really understand exactly how to explain like what's going on in the guy's brain, but he has these amazing visions. And what he says is, he has a message for a time during the Babylonian exile. And I just want to say, so this is about 586 BCE. To paint the picture for you, the temple has just been destroyed. The Babylonians have taken out the temple in Jerusalem and have exiled the rich and the elite to Babylon. But think for a moment. Our temple has just been destroyed. If you are an Israelite, if you are a person living at this time, I cannot overestimate how devastating an event this must have been. We have just lost holiness in space. We have just lost the place that we went to 3 times a year, where the priests continually do the sacrifices. We've just lost the place where God's Shekhinah dwells, where God lives effectively. And you have to know that in biblical times, because we all are rabbinic Jews, so we think about God as everywhere. Woohoo! Good times. But during this time, God of ancient times were much more located in the geography of the place. So, for example, the first Jew in the Bible, you might be surprised to learn, the first person is referred to as a Yehudi, is Mordechai. In chapter 2, verse 5, I think, of the book of Esther. And why is he named Mordechai? His name is from Marduk, which is the king of Babylon, right? It's a late text. So gods were really thought of as kind of belonging to their own town. So if there is a time now where the place that God is living has just been destroyed, oh my God, you must be in total panic. By the rivers of Babylon, yea, we wept when we remembered Zion. How are we going to possibly come back from this? If we believe that God's house was destroyed, we might be thinking, was God destroyed? What is going on? And they might very much have had the idea that they were being punished for their sins. After all, it says in the book of Exodus, chapter 20, verses 5 through 6, and can we have that slide? Right, this is the part of Aseret Devarim. I know it's called Aseret HaDibrot these days, but biblically speaking, it's called Aseret Devarim, the 10 Commandments. And one of them says, I'm the Lord your God, a jealous God, visiting the guilt of the parents upon the children, upon the 3rd and upon the 4th generations of those who reject me, but showing kindness to the 1,000 generations of those who love me. So here's the thing. If you are sitting in the Babylonian exile, your temple has been destroyed, you don't know what happened to God, you've been pushed out of your place. And you're sitting there thinking, oh, did I do something wrong? Did I do something wrong that caused this? And not only am I going to suffer, but those after me are going to suffer. What possible hope do I have? So thank God we have a text that has an encounter between Ezekiel and God. Here is how you will start to see the creativity and the innovation of what becomes the Jewish people during the time of the Babylonian exile. This is what helps us survive. Creativity and innovation is what is going to help us survive. When you look around, you don't see the Assyrians. Where are the Babylonians or the Moabites? But we see Jews through creativity and innovation. So the word of God, Ezekiel chapter 18, verses 1 through 4. Does somebody want to read? All right, Jill, thank you.
The word of God came to me. What do you mean by quoting this proverb upon the soil of Israel? Parents eat sour grapes and their children's teeth are blunted. As I live, declares the sovereign God, this proverb shall no longer be current among you in Israel. Consider, all lives are mine. The life of the parent and the life of the child are both mine. Only the person who sins shall die.
Folks, this is a huge change, right? We expect encounters between God and prophets, but this message overturns everything that came before it in terms of understanding intergenerational punishment. What this says now is there is no longer intergenerational punishment. Now, only the person who sins will be punished. This is a radical change in biblical theology. Creativity and innovation, responding to a crisis. The prophet is saying, God has changed God's ways. Only the person whose sins will be responsible. I imagine that there was great hope now in the community. But Ezekiel isn't done. Let's go to the last slide, Kim. If you're worried about whether God was killed or destroyed when the temple was destroyed, and believe me, people might have been. If you worry that God can only be with you when you are in the geographical land of Israel, and you're sitting in Babylon, what are you going to do? Ezekiel has this message for you. First, verses 22 and 23. The cherubs with the wheels beside them lifted their wings while the presence of the God of Israel rested above them. The presence of God ascended from the midst of the city and stood on the hill east of the city. And God says, God removed the people from Israel and put them all among the nations. God has scattered them among the countries. And God says, and I have become to them a Migdash Ma'at, a diminished sanctity in the countries wherever they have gone. Ezekiel is saying to people, God left the Beit HaMikdash, the temple, before it was destroyed. Not only that, but God is going into what is now exile. God is going with you to all the places that you were going. Again, a huge transformation in biblical theology, a huge change to adapt and adjust to the circumstances in which they found themselves. But here's the thing, to go back to where I started, only the people who were open to this message, only the people who had curiosity and stuck with things through difficult times would have been the ones who heard this message and perhaps had the audacity and the courage to go from here, to go on, to continue what had been started. I'm going to stop there and say thank you so much. We have about 10 or so minutes for any questions and comments. But before I do that, I just want to say, I want to acknowledge, there are many of you that I know from different parts of my life, and I'm so happy to see you. I do want to acknowledge one person whose name is Ian Mann, who is was the director of Judaica of my high school. And I am so honored that he came to join us today from Johannesburg, South Africa, because really he was such a critical influence in my life and in my Jewish journey of becoming a Jewish educator. I always thought I was going to be a lawyer. He knew I was going to be a Jewish educator way before I did. So, Mr. Mann, thank you so much for joining, and I'm honored by your presence. Comments, questions? Steve, yes.
Yeah, I still have a question going back to Moshe at the burning bush, because it
Yes.
says, I wonder what the Hebrew word is for aside and what the literal translation is. Because it says initially that Moses looks directly, sees right in front of him the burning bush. Then he says to himself, I must turn aside. Does that mean I can't look at it directly, or what's going on there?
Well, the Hebrew word is asura, so it says literally, let me turn. So either it's moved a little bit or he's moved a little bit such that he now has to move his body to turn and look.
Okay.
Claire.
So I was struck by the word diminished sanctity.
Mm-hmm.
So if he's gone, if Adonai has joined all those who are scattered all around the world, why is he considered a diminished sanctity?
So, yeah, I think, I used to tell my 9th graders when I taught at Gann Academy that translation is interpretation. I think it's actually a poor translation of Mikdash Ma'at. It might have been in comparison with the size of the Beit HaMikdash, but I think what it meant was it's a smaller version. God has condensed God's self into being a smaller version and a mobile version as he goes.
Okay, thanks.
Sure. Ellen, yeah.
Is that another iteration of the initial Tzimtzum to create the world?
Well, it's interesting because Tzimtzum is really a much later Hasidic reading of creation, how that happened. So if anything, they're taking it from this rather than the other way around. But yes, I mean, it certainly does allow for more space for others. One day I had not thought of this, so thank you for this question, Claire, but I think one day it would be worth really doing a study on God's presence and absence. I mean, we know God disappears certainly by Ketuvim, right, in Megillat Esther and Megillat Ruth, in the book of Esther and Ruth, God's already gone. There's no more direct intervention by the time you come back from the Babylonian exile. But it is interesting to think about where is God's presence or absence relative to human innovation, invention, creativity? So maybe something to think about for down the line. Thank you. Carol, yeah.
So I think another translation of Mikdash Ma'at could be a small sanctuary. And it's used in the prayer for a new bride and groom that may their lives be unprotected in a Mikdash Ma'at. And I didn't think of it before, Susie, but that made the link for me that as God was creating a Mikdash Ma'at for all of the Jews or Hebrews going into exile, that he was blessing them with protection and fertility so that they could continue to create the Jewish people in exile wherever they went.
Oh, I love that. I love that. And what's so interesting is that they go into exile in 586 BCE and 538 BCE. The Babylonians are defeated by the Persians, and the Persians, Cyrus the Great says, you know what, you can go home now. And 90% of Jewry, 90% say, you know what, thanks so much. We're going to hang out here. We're not going to go back. Only 10% went back to Eretz Israel, to the land of Israel. 90% stayed in Babylon. You know why? Because they were fruitful and multiplied, and they had the protection that they needed, which is how we get the Babylonian Talmud and all of that down the line, which is when, by the way, we move from living in exile to living in diaspora. We become a people of diaspora, a chosen distance from the land of Israel, which I love to connect that up now with Mikdash Ma'at. Thank you. Jay, yeah.
So I was thinking about how Manoach does not come off very well. He comes off very poorly. And is Manoach, does that translate as from Noah? And isn't that interesting how Noah is presented as being so righteous in his time, but Manoach, not so. What do we do with that?
I love that. First of all, I would say Noah, yeah, he's righteous in his generation, but he also has some troubles. After he gets out of the ark, that's the part that we focus on. But he has a few issues with alcohol. Let's just leave it there for right now. But the Shoresh Noach, Nun Vavchet, Lanuach, to rest, kind of fits with him being Manoach, being the son from the tribe of Dan, which wasn't so well respected in ancient Israel. But I didn't even go into all that there is in that text, and so there's even more to discover. Yes, about kind of how he likes to rest and is a kind of lazy guy versus the powerful Mrs. Manoach who doesn't get a name. So this might be a good moment just for me to pause and say again that starting in February, I'm going to be teaching a course called Courageous and Audacious Voices in the Bible. And I would say it's kind of like a lot like today, except we go a little slower and a little deeper, and there's more conversation. And it really, that conversation is deeply enriching for me and for other students in the class. And I think, many of you would seem to work for you guys because you contributed so wonderfully today. I don't know if there are any last minute comments that people want to make before we say goodbye.
I just want to say that that course it's on Thursday mornings. And it is on Zoom, so you don't have to be in the Boston area to take that class. You can be anywhere in the world, even South Africa, or I think we have one of our participants is from Australia too. So as long as the time zone works. I see Ari has a question or a thought before I close us out.
Ari?
Yeah, I just wanted to share from before. It seems like a lot of the underlying message of how to greet an angel is to be open to miracles. And I think particularly the story of the woman who gets pregnant after not having had the opportunity to have a child really struck with me, because I think it's so easy for us when we get the thing we've been praying for, that we've always wanted, to deny ourselves that gift and think that we don't deserve it, or kind of to have so much identified with our pain that we can't identify with the part of ourselves that is capable of embracing that gift. So I think there's like an underlying message in that at least I'm going to take with me from this class.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. I'm wondering, because there are a whole bunch of you, I'm wondering if I could ask if there's one word that you could put in the chat, or a few words of like an idea that you're taking away from today, or a feeling that you have in this moment after doing this text study with all of us. That would be great, because we can't, unfortunately, that was so great that Ari shared that lesson that they're taking away, but unfortunately we can't hear from all of you. But I would love to get some sense of what you're taking away or how you're feeling in this moment. So if you, as Kim, I think, is going to close us out in the next minute or two, if you could put in the chat something, that would be really wonderful.
That's great. And I think I just changed, oh, maybe not. I thought I changed it so everyone, oh, I'd see, galvanized. Make sure you do it to everyone and not a direct message to me, so that we can see those. And while those are coming in, I want to thank Susie so much for today's inspiring teaching. It's really been an honor to have the opportunity to learn with you and to think about text in a new way. And I want to let everyone know that a couple of things. One is the Grow series continues next month on February 14th, where we will have the opportunity to learn from Dr. Alan Avery Peck, whose session is on what the New Testament can teach us about first century Judaism. It's going to be a fascinating talk, and he is also teaching a course that starts later in March, but it should be something that maybe it might be a little less familiar to many of us. Our colleague Robin Kahn had put into the chat, and maybe she'll do it one more time, the link to register for the next Grow, but also just to peruse our course catalog to see if there's anything that's of interest. And if you're anything like me, it's going to be hard to choose just one or two. But we have a lot of wonderful things coming up, and please continue to check Kolenu and other correspondence from us so that we can continue to be in relationship. And thank you so much for coming today.
Thank you. It was a blast. I hope that I see some of you again somewhere, somehow. And Pete, please keep putting those things in the chat because they're just really wonderful to see. Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.